Hello, and welcome to a quick Guild Ball battle report. This footage was taken from Game 1 of breaking the Ice Oslo tournament we had in early March 2024, which is the first proper tournament we've had in ages, so it was tons of fun, and we're really psyched about the revival of Guild Ball here in Norway. But there was a lot of rust to get rid of, which was very apparent in many of the games. But anyways, here's a game between my Alchemist and my local opponent's Masons. So Alchemists won the roll-off and chose to kick, and their roster was Soma, Flask, Kami, O Calculus, Crucible, and O Catalyst, playing against the Mason roster of Corbelli, Marbles, Flint, Lucky, Brick, and Veteran Chisel. So I've only played Soma since the revival of Guild Ball, and mostly because I didn't get to play him a whole lot the last time around, but I really do enjoy the synergies he has with the rest of the guild and the squaddies in particular, and I really enjoy kicking with him. So I've thought a lot about the kicking lineup, and I felt like I was well prepared going into this game. And my opponent wanted to play Corbelli for the second time ever, I believe, so we'll see how that goes. I've included a graph of the guild plan cards that we both chose and saw during our selection. So as the Alchemist player, I got a pretty good spread. I didn't get to see a whole of or any of the sixes, so I was a bit worried that my opponent had a lot of the higher cards. But in the end, I was pretty happy with this. It was a pretty good selection for me. My opponent also had a pretty good spread, going for a very balanced spread of cards, electing for a 2, a 3, a 5, 6, and a 7. So I think we were pretty equal when it came to game plan cards going into this game. Okay, so the game starts with Crucible kicking. She rolled to kick and got a successful hit, and pretty much got the ball right where I wanted it, like barely crossing the line, so that was very good. And we go into allocation. So for round 1, Masons gave Corbelli 6, Marbles 1, Flint 4, Lucky 0, Brick 1, and Veteran Chisel 1. And for the Alchemists, Soma gets 4, Flask 0, Kami 4, Ocalc 2, Crucible 3, and Ocat 0. So Masons start with Veteran Chisel. She goes and gets the ball and passes it to Marbles, and he makes space with Brick. Unfortunately, she misses the first pass of the tournament, which is a bit funny, but anyway, it scatters and it lands in a position where Marbles can snap the ball anyway, so the only real loss here was the momentum. Next activation is Calculus, who throws down a Noxious Blast in front of her, and she intentionally hits Flask so that he takes 2 damage and poison, which is really just to prepare him exploding later in the game, so that the Masons have to consider that he could just run in and get hit with a Noxious Blast at a later point and explode if he gets low enough, which I really like doing. Then she moves up behind Crucible, so that Crucible has her battery, which she needs to get a free character play later in the turn. Then Marbles activates. He passes to Corbelli and triggers the making space by moving Lucky up the board. The pass is successful and he banks the momentum. Next, Flask moves up 4 inches in front of Kami, which means that Kami now has a battery as well, so she can teleport to Flask, which gives her a pretty good threat range for later in the turn. Flask also gives Beaker Keeper to Crucible, so she now has 2 free character plays. Next, Brick sprints up a bit further up the pitch. And then O Catalyst moves up into a better position, also 4 inches in front of Kami, meaning that she can jump to him as well. So I have a lot of choices now. And I don't really think that the Mason player can threaten Catalyst in any meaningful way. Corbelli dodges Flint and passes to him. The pass is successful, and he considers dodging Flint even further up the pitch, but he's afraid that Crucible would just go get the ball from him, so he stays and banks the momentum. He then moves further up the pitch and also moves Brick into base-to-base contact with Crucible, which makes it harder for her to actually move around later in the turn. Corbelli gets into a better position. And then it's Alchemists. So the 6-stack from Corbelli wasn't really utilized that much this turn, which I feel like is a weak point going forward in this game because it meant that I had pretty much all the momentum this turn. Next, I move Soma, and I realize now that moving Calculus so close to Crucible, I mean putting her in base-to-base contact, was probably a mistake because Crucible is now vulnerable to being jailed, with one of my own models being one of the jailers, which usually isn't a really good place to be. But anyway, I elect or think about maybe using Nitro to fix that, but then I go away from that thought and I use Raging Fire on both Crucible and Kami so that they get Inferno, which is very good with Soma's backdraft ability as well. Next, the Mason player measures the goal range on Flint, but sees that it's not really going to be possible, so he just moves Flint into a more defensible position, hoping to keep him safe from the other Alchemist players that are yet to go. Which is, of course, not really an easy thing to do, considering I have both Kami and Crucible, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so Kami activates, and with Inferno active, she can utilize Backdraft very easily from Soma at almost every attack and still spread conditions with Chemical Ordnance. So she jumps to Catalyst and then jogs into range of Marbles. I reckon killing the monkey early when the loved creature isn't really relevant was a good move. So Kami only really needs to momentously dodge and people will die. So with Backdraft and Anatomical Precision, it's quite easy. So for every attack here, Kami will do fire and 1 damage on Marbles and to everyone who's within 2 of her that are also on fire. So basically, she just does a lot of momentous dodges and deals out fire to all the players around her while continuously backdrafting from Marbles. So even though she doesn't really do anything with the ball or anything, she sets up the team with fire, she gathers a bunch of momentum, and she makes it so that I can kill Marbles basically when I want to. Okay, so for the Mason activation, Lucky does nothing, so really I have a double back-to-back last activation here. So Crucible goes, she steals poison from O Calculus to get a free character play. She then buys a dodge to get out of the situation with Brick there. She can't get quite out of melee range, but she buys an attack, and with Backdraft it's really easy to just get a dodge. So she dodges out and does the whole Infernal thing, and she gets into range of Flint. She does the Beaker Keeper to get a Great Balls of Fire, and she gets it with a bonus time, so the ball is on the Alchemist side now. She then does another attack on Brick to get another momentous dodge and the fire, and she dodges within 2 of Marbles. And she does a last attack on Marbles, dealing momentous 2 damage, which does poison and fire and the 1 damage from Inferno. So, at the end of turn 1, Marbles dies from conditions, which you could argue might have been a mistake. My reasoning at the time was that I wanted to kill him so that Loved Creature wouldn't trigger for turn 2, but maybe actually having the extra activation and like killing Marbles before he could activate would have been the better play, especially since I have Backdraft for a lot of my attacks. There's a lot of condition damage going out. I'm not going to bother really taking care of all of that, but at the end, Alchemists have 7 momentum versus 2 momentum from the Masons. Alchemist plays Hit 'em where it hurts to guarantee the first turn, and then also to threaten a takeout, putting the -1 armor on Chisel. And the Masons play Aggressive Defense for +1 influence and Poised on the opponent's half of the pitch, where, for example, Brick is right now. Okay, so for turn 2, the Alchemist influence is Soma 1, Kami 4, Crucible 3, Catalyst 4, and Calculus 1. And for Masons, it's Corbelli 6, Flint 4, Lucky 1, Brick 3, and Chisel 1. Then Marble jogs onto the pitch. And we go. So I thought about doing something else first, but I think I'm just going to go score just to get it out of the way and to put some pressures on the Masons. So I start with Crucible, and she has a perfect line where she can just jog and stay within Chisel's melee zone and stay out of both Flint and Lucky. So she does that. And then she's just going to start buying attacks. And because there's so much fire around, she can backdraft with plenty of people to do that from. So with tax 7 and the minus armor from Chisel, it's really not a problem to get the results I want. Because I have 3 influence on Crucible, I don't take the dodge straight away, so I first do a Momentous 2 damage Poison Fire, which is a great result from Crucible. And then on the next attack, I actually wrap, and we figure out that I'm just outside of 6 from the goal, so I have to do a unmomentous double dodge and a momentous dodge to get within tap-in range. So I do that. And then I bonus time the shot on goal, and it goes in. So that's Alchemist goes to 5. And Crucible just stays there so that she can be a snapshot turret or just go get the ball at a later turn. Okay, so the Masons are not in a great position here. The first turn was very Alchemist favored, and going into the second turn, that's very apparent now. The Masons are under a lot of pressure, so the goal kick lands in the middle of the pitch. There's a bit of decision making here, but the Mason player ends up activating Flint, who sprints and grabs the ball. Because Flint is on fire and stuff, this is a bit uncomfortable to do, and his movement is a bit lower than it should have been, which is also a great part of the whole Alchemist Soma fire thing. And it doesn't really want to spend the momentum to clear. So he's looking at different options here on how to go further out the pitch with Flint, and he really wants to give the ball to Corbelli at some point. At this point, I think we forget that making space is a thing, so we kind of forget it at this point. So it could have dodged further up when doing this pass, but we just forgot. So the pass to Corbelli is successful, but he wants to keep the momentum so he doesn't dodge Corbelli anywhere. And he then does a where they go with Flint to get him further up the pitch and to stay in front of Corbelli, just to sort of like screen him a bit. Next, here I consider going with Kami, but considering that the chances of actually getting the ball from Corbelli are quite low, and I don't want to use her activation before Corbelli has actually scored, I choose to go with Catalyst instead to get a takeout on Chisel. So I just jog up and I start attacking and backdrafting, and just without like any support, O Catalyst is on 10 dice, so it's very hard for him to flub at any point. So I basically do a whole lot of external combustions and I wrap at some point. And Chisel being a 3-1 at this point in time, she just evaporates. So Catalyst just walks up and gets a kill, and I get a lot of momentum. And the Alchemist goes to 7. So next for the Mason side, Brick activates and he wants to start hitting Calculus. So he gets poison for starting within 2 of her, and then he starts attacking. So he does a momentous knockdown, and then he doesn't really have a lot of luck with his dice going for the next ones, but he does a momentous 2 and a momentous 2. So Calculus takes 4 damage in total and is knocked down. Because I really don't want Calculus to die here, and she's in a very good position to blind Corbelli, I activate her next. I forfeit movement, and we check that she has line of sight to Corbelli, and I bonus time a blind into him, and it succeeds. So that's very good for me. I then steal poison from Brick in order to do a free Noxious Blast, hitting all of the 3 Mason players there. I don't manage to actually hit Corbelli, but I get Flint and Brick. So that's a pretty good activation from Calculus. She then spends some momentum to heal herself, so she's back to full. Next, The Mason player really don't want to activate Corbelli yet because I have Kami, so he's trying to wait it out. So he activates Lucky, who doesn't attack but doesn't actually manage to get something. So it doesn't really change the board state in any way. Next, I'm considering what to do again. I think I'm using a lot of clock here, forgetting that I should just activate Flask and like give Beaker Keeper to someone or do something. I kind of forget he's there, to be honest. So I measure a couple things. I think about a few things. I really did consider using Kami to like teleport to Catalyst, jog into Corbelli, tackle or dodge out, and do a lot of bullshit. But considering I just killed V-Chisel before she activated, I am gonna have the last activation, so I'm not really in any rush at all. So in the end, I just decide to move Flask into contact with Brick, and he uses Beaker Keeper on himself to put down a smoke cloud on both him and Calculus. So the thought here is that if Corbelli wants to go for the goal and he wants to use someone to gain momentum and in any way like use the 6 influence he has, it's going to be very hard being both blind and attacking models in cover. So next up, Marble just jogs up the pitch. Basically, we're just wasting activations. I consider going legendary with Soma here and charging Lucky, but then we realize, of course, that Forest block line of sight, so I can't actually see Lucky from this position. So instead, I figure I'm just going to reposition so that for the next turn I can easily kill Flint if I want to, or if Corbelli wants to go that way and stay like on the edges of the pitch, he's not going to escape from Soma, so Soma can still go get him, which is kind of the thought process there. And if he wants to go through Soma, he has to get fire. So there's like a lot of bad consequences for doing that. And also he's now a 4-1 in cover, so he's a terrible target for the potential goal run. So finally, Masons have no more activations other than Corbelli, so we start measuring up the goal run. So being blinded, Corbelli is actually still a pretty good kicker. I mean, he has 3-6 kick, like a pretty good squaddy. So the goal run isn't off by any means, just by him being blinded. So we see here a sprint from Corbelli. I think it's not a charge because he doesn't actually have line of sight to Calculus anymore, because Flask actually went into that little spot that we used earlier in order to him to get blinded. So he sprints and attacks, and he gets all successes, so that's a momentous double dodge. So you see the red marker there is where he's at right now. And then he does a series of attacks that unfortunately don't do anything. And in the end, he bonus times the last one, still doesn't get anything, so the goal run is actually ruined. After doing this, we look at the card, and the Mason player realizes that he could have just used acrobatics to get into range. So that was very unfortunate, but that's just like a symptom of not having played Corbelli that much. So he ends up not getting in range, so the blind was very influential here, which is just another point in saying how good Calculus is. So he ends up within 8 of the goal, but just standing there with the ball. So the last activation of the turn is Kami, and I was really expecting the goal, so I didn't think I would still have to try to steal the ball from Corbelli. But standing in this position, it's actually a pretty reasonable assumption that she could. So I start by attacking Lucky, and I get a momentous, an unmomentous double dodge, just to get out of melee range with him. I then jog into base contact with Corbelli and take care to stay outside of the counter charge. And I basically backdraft a whole lot of attacks. And keep in mind that all of these attacks are also chemical ordnances, dealing out more fire just to fuel her backdrafting even more. So for the first attack, I actually wrap. So I take the tackle. So the first one is unmomentous and not working because of close control, but the second one actually allows me to then take the ball. And Corbelli took a counterattack and he gets the tackle. So the ball basically goes back to Corbelli. I think the hope was that I wouldn't actually break close control and he would get a double dodge on the counterattack. Even though he's tack 3 with blind and I'm a defense 5, it could have happened, so it was a good thought. But I still have 2 influence. The wrap really helped this sort of like math issue of having enough influence to attack enough times. So I attack again, I backdraft, and I get the tackle. And I think this really shows the strength of Kami in a Soma lineup. I mean, Kami is probably the best squaddy in Alchemist anyway, but with Soma, she's like turned up to 11. I do wrap here, so I take the tackle and a double dodge. And then I remove the poison from Lucky to teleport to him. So basically, I go in, get the ball, get out, and get into a goal scoring position. Sadly, I don't have enough influence to like do all the things, so I can't score here as well. So I just do an attack on Lucky to generate more momentum and to get into a better position for the next turn. Since he counterattacked, I had to go dodge out, which sort of makes me think that I shouldn't have attacked at all and just stayed within melee range, because now I actually have to think about how do I get back into range with Lucky and then out of it again to score the goal. So I think that was actually a miscalculation on my part. I should have just either attacked Corbelli again or just wasted the influence, to be honest. Now I'm lucky here because Kami is Kami and she is probably the model that does this the best, so it's not really an issue, but it could have easily been. And that's the end of turn 2. So the Alchemists are leading with 6 momentum, 9 versus 3. I play Lock Them Down on Lucky just to guarantee the first turn, and the Masons play Raw Enthusiasm to give Put Me Back In coach on Lucky because he's expecting that he might die at some point. Okay, so for turn 3, Alchemists choose to go first. The allocation is Kami 4, Catalyst 4, Soma 4, and Crucible 2. For the Masons, it's Corbelli 6, Brick 3, Marbles 1, Flint 4, and Lucky 1. Okay, so the obvious thing here is that I have to score the goal in order to go to 11 in order to like really solidify the pressure. So Kami goes first. She teleports to Lucky by lifting the fire. The Mason player is not countering here. I think he wants to save the momentum and he thinks the goal run is like an inevitability at this point. I attack with Kami and she takes the dodge and the chemical ordnance and she just basically keeps doing what she's been doing all game. Since there was no counterattack declared, there's really no incentive for me to try to get away just yet, so I try to get as much momentum as I can. I keep attacking, gathering momentum and doing damage, and until I eventually double dodge out. I walk into base contact with the goal just in case if I miss, and I bonus time a shot on goal, and it scores, which brings the Alchemist up to 11, really solidifying the lead I have right now. Okay, so the kickout goes to marbles. So there's going to be quite a complicated goal run here, which I think could have been done easier if marbles didn't pick up the ball and Corbelli just legendaried. I'm not sure if it would have worked. It's difficult to see here with the ranges and stuff. But with an acrobatics, a legendary, and a sprint, I reckon Corbelli would have made this goal run just fine on his own. But I think also there's an element of fun here. So he chooses to go for the Marbles Pass Corbelli Snapshot Goal Run, which, I mean, it's not a super bad choice, but he goes for it, and the pass from Marbles is successful, and the snapshot is also successful, bringing the Masons to 4 points. So the score is now 11-4. I think it's at this point it was more just to do something fun, and he was right. It was. So I do the goal kick. The ball lands somewhere on the right side of the pitch where we've basically not played at all this entire game. You can see I've zoomed in for this entire game and every player is on either in the middle or on the top side. But really, I have 11 points. I don't need a ball. I need to kill marbles, and marbles is at half health. So Catalyst with 4 influence has never had an easier job in his entire life. I mean, he doesn't really have any issues here. He rolls a bit bad for a first roll, actually, but like he demolishes the monkey, which nets the win for the Alchemists, 12-4. So yeah, that's that. And that was the first game of the tournament. Sadly, I did record the others, but none of them actually survived the footage stage. I really wanted to make battle reports out of all the games, but this was the only one that survived. If you want more battle reports, please leave a comment and say what you liked about this format and what you didn't like, and I'll try to make more. Thank you for watching.